What if I told you that Scotty from Star Trek stormed the beaches of Normandy on D-Day and was hit 6 times? Or that the King of Hollywood himself flew combat missions, anticipating he may not come home? These aren't movie plots. These are the incredible true stories of stars who left fame behind to serve their country. A comprehensive look at Hollywood's biggest stars who left fame behind to serve their country in World War II and beyond, including their incredible stories of courage, sacrifice, and the battles that changed them forever. These accounts are shared to provide historical education about the military service of Hollywood personalities and to honor their sacrifices. All information is based on historical records and documented accounts. Paul Newman. You know Paul Newman from Cool Hand Luke and Butch Cassidy. But here's what most people don't know. He almost passed away in World War II. At 19, Newman enlisted in the Navy, hoping to become a pilot. One problem, he was colorblind. So instead, he became a radio man and rear gunner on torpedo bombers in the Pacific. Newman was stationed on the USS Bunker Hill when fate stepped in. His pilot came down with an ear infection right before they were supposed to join the brutal Okinawa campaign. That illness kept them grounded. On May 11, 1945, while Newman watched from shore, 2 kamikaze planes slammed into the Bunker Hill. 393 sailors passed away that day. If his pilot hadn't gotten sick, Newman would have been on that ship. Newman earned 3 medals and was discharged in 1946. But he never forgot watching that black smoke pour from the carrier, knowing his squadron buddies were trapped inside. That survivor's guilt haunted him his entire life and drove him to give away hundreds of millions to charity. Those famous blue eyes that made him a movie star, they almost cost him his naval career because of colorblindness. Funny how life works out. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis lit up the screen in Some Like It Hot. But at 17, he was just a kid from the Bronx who lied his way into the Navy after Pearl Harbor. Curtis served on the USS Proteus, a submarine tender in the Pacific. His job? Managing ship-to-ship communications with signal flags and Morse code. Pretty tough when English wasn't even his first language. Growing up speaking Hungarian, Curtis struggled with the technical English needed for his signalman duties. The cramped submarine conditions reminded him of his childhood poverty, but it also toughened him up. Then came September 2nd, 1945. From the deck of the Proteus in Tokyo Bay, Curtis had a front-row seat to history, Japan's formal surrender on the USS Missouri. After the war, Curtis used the GI Bill to study acting in New York. That military discipline he learned, it helped him channel his rebellious energy into performances instead of trouble. Not bad for a poor kid who could barely speak English when he enlisted. Charles Bronson. Charles Bronson's tough guy roles weren't acting. They came from real experience. Born Charles Bukinski, the 11th of 15 kids to a Lithuanian coal miner, Bronson knew hardship before he ever saw a movie set. In 1943, he enlisted as an aerial gunner on B-29 bombers, flying 25 missions over Japan. Those cramped bomber flights triggered the same claustrophobia he'd felt working in coal mines with his father. On one mission, enemy fire tore through his plane, and he was seriously wounded by shrapnel. He earned a Purple Heart, but the real wounds were psychological. Watching fellow airmen pass away, dealing with constant terror, it changed him. After the war, Bronson couldn't adjust to civilian life. Acting became his outlet for all that inner turmoil. That quiet, steely determination you see in his movies? That wasn't Hollywood magic. That was forged in the skies over Japan. Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart was already a huge star when he decided to enlist in 1941. Coming from a military family, both grandfathers fought in the Civil War, he felt duty-bound to serve. One problem, At 6 feet 3 inches, he was too skinny. So Stewart did what any determined guy would do. He stuffed himself with spaghetti, steak, and milkshakes until he made weight. Stewart started as a private, but quickly rose through the ranks. He commanded B-24 bomber squadrons in England, flying 20 combat missions over Germany. But here's what Hollywood never told you. Stewart came home broken. The psychological trauma from combat left him unable to sleep and experiencing severe nightmares about planes exploding and fellow airmen falling. In one mission alone, his unit lost 13 planes and 130 men. Stewart suffered from what we now understand as PTSD, losing so much weight from trauma that he appeared gaunt when he returned to Hollywood. When Frank Capra directed him in It's a Wonderful Life, he noticed Stewart's haunted look and worked it into George Bailey's character. Like many veterans of his generation, Stewart never spoke publicly about his trauma. He carried those psychological wounds silently for the rest of his life, demonstrating the need for better mental health support for returning servicemen. Sterling Hayden had it all. A $250,000 contract with Paramount and leading Man Looks. But when America entered the war, this 6 feet 5 inches sailor turned actor walked away from Hollywood without a second thought. He joined the Marines under a fake name to avoid publicity, then got recruited by the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. As an OSS agent, Hayden ran guns to Yugoslav partisans fighting the Nazis. He navigated dangerous waters in the Adriatic, coordinated with resistance fighters behind enemy lines, and earned a Silver Star for gallantry. This wasn't movie heroics. This was the real deal. After the war, Hayden found Hollywood superficial and meaningless. In his autobiography, he wrote, "The war, for all its death and misery and terror, had been the one great experience of my life. To hell with the movies, to hell with Hollywood." He briefly joined the Communist Party in 1946, a decision he later regretted during the McCarthy hearings. That world weariness you see in his performances in The Asphalt Jungle and The Godfather, it came from someone who'd seen too much. Alec Guinness, before Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Oscar-winning performance in The Bridge on the River Kwai, Alec Guinness was commanding a landing craft under enemy fire. As a Royal Navy officer, he participated in some of the war's biggest operations: Sicily, D-Day, and dangerous missions to Yugoslav partisans. In July 1943, Guinness commanded landing craft infantry 380 during the Sicily invasion, ferrying British troops to the beaches under heavy fire. A year later, he was back at it for D-Day, again landing troops at Normandy amid intense combat. His most dangerous mission came in 1944 when he was sent to Yugoslavia to supply arms to partisans. His landing craft survived multiple attacks from German patrol boats and aircraft, plus a brutal storm that nearly sank them. Guinness rarely discussed his war service, preferring to focus on acting. But those leadership skills and those intense high-stakes experiences, they gave weight to his military roles, especially his Academy Award-winning Colonel Nicholson. You can't fake that kind of authenticity. Christopher Lee had the most mysterious war service of any actor. In 1939, he volunteered to fight for Finland against the Soviets, though British volunteers were kept from actual combat. When Britain entered the war, he joined RAF intelligence, despite vision problems that initially grounded him. Lee served with the Long-Range Desert Group in North Africa and later worked with the Special Operations Executive, Britain's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Fluent in multiple languages, he became invaluable for reconnaissance and planning operations against Axis forces. But here's the thing. Lee rarely talked about what he did, citing the Official Secrets Act. At times, Lee spoke of knowing the harsh realities of close-quarters combat. His work hunting Nazi war criminals after the war left him with nightmares that lasted his entire life. That aristocratic bearing and cultured demeanor, it masked someone who'd witnessed some of the war's darkest moments, which he channeled into his legendary villain portrayals. Kirk Douglas, born Isur Danielovich to poor Russian Jewish immigrants, enlisted in the Navy right after Pearl Harbor. Commissioned as an ensign, he served on the USSPC 1139, a patrol craft hunting German U-boats in the Atlantic. His job was communications officer, keeping crucial contact during those nerve-wracking convoy missions. In 1944, Douglas was honorably discharged after sustaining abdominal injuries when a depth charge exploded prematurely during an anti-submarine patrol. That painful experience influenced how he approached acting, especially in war films, where he insisted on showing combat's psychological cost alongside the physical dangers. Douglas learned something valuable in the Navy. Fear is useless. Either you do something about the situation, or you accept it. That determination served him well when he became an independent producer, pioneering the path for actor-producers in Hollywood. Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks was just 17 when he was drafted, and the Army made him a combat engineer. You know, the guy who defuses landmines. As Brooks joked later, "The two things I hate most are combat and engineering." But his humor masks serious heroism. This Brooklyn kid saved countless lives by defusing bombs with steady hands while enemy fire crackled around him. Brooks served with the 1,104th Engineer Combat Battalion during the Battle of the Bulge. In one surreal moment that perfectly captures his spirit, he confronted German soldiers across battle lines by singing "Toot Toot Tootsie Goodbye" through a megaphone. The surprised Germans actually sang harmonies back. This musical exchange in the middle of a battlefield became vintage Mel Brooks, finding humor in the darkest situations. As the son of Jewish Russian parents, Brooks was fighting the regime's systematic persecution and persecution of Jewish people. That weight, combined with the daily terror of defusing explosives, shaped his later comedy style of confronting life's absurdities with laughter. Clark Gable. Clark Gable was the king of Hollywood, but in 1942, he was just a heartbroken man. When his wife Carol Lombard passed away in a plane crash returning from a war bond tour, friends say Gable was consumed by grief and enlisted while devastated by his loss. At 41, he was older than most recruits, but overwhelming sorrow drove him to train as an aerial gunner and fly combat missions over Europe. Gable helped produce Combat America to support the war effort, but his real focus was on dangerous missions. Reports suggest Hitler himself was a fan and allegedly offered $5,000 to any German soldier who could capture the actor alive. Gable's commanding officers, knowing about this threat, tried to keep him from combat operations. He insisted on participating anyway. When Gable returned to Hollywood, colleagues noticed he'd aged dramatically. Premature gray hair and a haunted expression that changed his screen presence forever. The carefree romantic lead was gone, replaced by a more somber, introspective actor who'd lost the love of his life and seen too much war. Charlton Heston. Before playing Moses and Ben-Hur, Charlton Heston was freezing his butt off in Alaska. In 1944, at 21, he enlisted in the Army Air Forces and trained as a radio operator and aerial gunner on B-25 bombers. He was assigned to the 77th Bombardment Squadron in the Aleutian Islands, basically the middle of nowhere, where extreme cold, fog, and winds made flying a nightmare. The Aleutian campaign involved reconnaissance and anti-submarine patrols in the North Pacific, guarding against potential Japanese advances. Being a radio operator and gunner required technical skill and nerves of steel. You had to maintain communications while defending against enemy fighters. After his 1946 discharge, Heston used the GI Bill to study drama at Northwestern University. That military discipline and ability to stay calm under pressure. It served him well when he was commanding chariot races and parting the Red Sea on movie sets. Walter Matthau's grumpy old man persona came from real experience. He'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. Enlisting in 1942, at 22, Matthau served as a radio man gunner on B-24 bombers with the 8th Air Force in England. The mortality rate was brutal. Nearly 50% of airmen didn't make it back home. During a mission over Germany, enemy fire completely destroyed Matthau's B-24. 2 engines knocked out, losing altitude fast, the pilot ordered everyone to prepare to bail out. At the last second, he managed to stabilize the crippled bomber and limp back to England. The high possibility of almost not making it back really shifted Matthau's whole perspective on life. Later, Matthau transferred to Armed Forces Radio, where he developed the timing and vocal skills that made him famous. After 6 bombing missions, he earned the Air Medal. That blend of toughness, vulnerability, and gallows humor in his performances? It came from someone who'd faced leaving this earth too soon and lived to crack jokes about it. James Garner was lying about his age before he was lying about being a private investigator. At 16, he fibbed his way into the Merchant Marine during the final years of World War II, enduring grueling work and chronic seasickness. After the war, he joined the California National Guard, then got called up for Korea with the 24th Infantry Division. Serving as a rifleman on the front lines, Garner was wounded twice. First, he was hit by friendly fire when U.S. fighter jets mistakenly strafed his unit. The second injury came from either a landmine or shrapnel. Accounts vary. But here's the amazing part. Garner's extraordinary sense of smell once saved his entire platoon. During a night patrol, he detected garlic, commonly eaten by Korean and Chinese troops, and signaled his men to take cover just as an enemy patrol passed by. Garner earned 2 Purple Hearts, though bureaucratic red tape meant he didn't get his second medal until 1983, 32 years after the war. His combat experiences left him with a lifelong hatred of war and a healthy skepticism of authority that you can see in every role he played. Tony Bennett's smooth voice and sophisticated style mask, a combat veteran who witnessed some of the war's worst horrors. Drafted at 18, he served with the 63rd Infantry Division, facing intense combat in France and Germany during the war's brutal final months. A pivotal moment came on Thanksgiving 1945 when Bennett invited his black high school friend Frank Smith to dine with him. An Army officer discovered them together, launched into a hate-filled tirade, and demoted Bennett from corporal to private for defying segregation policies. This injustice solidified Bennett's lifelong stance as a civil rights advocate. As part of the historical liberation efforts, Bennett participated in the liberation of Landsberg concentration camp, witnessing the systematic atrocities committed by the Nazi regime, an experience he described as a profound and disturbing horror. These traumatic wartime experiences, including witnessing the terrible atrocities of the Holocaust, made him completely opposed to violence in any form, and drove his later activism, including marching with Martin Luther King Jr. from Selma to Montgomery in 1965. Henry Fonda was already a prominent actor when he enlisted in the Navy at 37. Despite his fame, he insisted on no special treatment, starting as an ordinary seaman before earning his commission. Serving first on the destroyer, USS Satterlee, in the Atlantic, he later became an intelligence officer in the Pacific Theater. Fonda's Bronze Star was awarded for his work planning and coordinating complex airstrikes during the campaigns at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. The citation praised his untiring energy in repelling Japanese forces. Though he rarely spoke about his wartime experiences, they profoundly influenced his military portrayals, particularly in Mr. Roberts, which drew on his naval service. After filming battle scenes for that movie, Fonda was observed sitting alone, visibly moved by memories of his actual time at sea during combat. His first-hand understanding of military discipline brought authenticity that resonated with fellow veterans. Lee Marvin's hard edge wasn't acting. It was earned on the beaches of Saipan. Enlisting in the Marines at 18, he served with the 4th Marine Division in the Pacific Theater. During the 1944 Battle of Saipan, due to Japanese machine gun fire, he suffered a severe injury to his sciatic nerve and damaged several vertebrae, leaving him in constant pain for life. Most of Marvin's unit, I Company, 3rd Battalion, 24th Marines, suffered devastating losses. He watched fellow Marines fall around him before he was hit. The injuries were so severe, he spent 13 months in naval hospitals, battling both physical pain and psychological trauma. That genuine toughness you see in The Dirty Dozen and Point Blank. Director Samuel Fuller noted that Marvin knew how men behaved under fire in a way that couldn't be taught. His military experience gave him unique insight into portraying soldiers authentically because he'd been there. Gene Autry was making over $600,000 a year, millions in today's money, when he walked away from it all to serve his country. The singing cowboy was 35, and at his career peak when he enlisted in the Army Air Forces in 1942. He took his oath live on his hit radio show, Melody Ranch, turning a personal decision into a public call to service. Commissioned as a flight officer in 1944, Autry flew the treacherous Hump route over the Himalayas in the China-Burma-India theater. These missions were notorious for extreme weather, high altitudes, causing altitude sickness, and the constant threat of drifting into Japanese territory. More than 1,000 airmen and 600 aircraft were lost on this route. Unlike many celebrities who stuck to publicity tours, Autry insisted on genuine service. He transported troops and supplies through some of the war's most dangerous flying conditions, later incorporating his experiences into his post-war performances while using his platform to honor fellow veterans. David Niven. David Niven was one of the few British actors who returned to Britain to serve when the war began. Commissioned as a lieutenant in the Rifle Brigade, he later joined the Commandos and served with the secretive Phantom Reconnaissance Regiment, specializing in intelligence gathering behind enemy lines. Niven arrived in France 5 days after D-Day and was tasked with establishing forward communication posts under heavy German fire. His unit gathered critical intelligence that helped coordinate Allied advances. Despite his light-hearted public persona, Niven witnessed horrific casualties and brutal combat realities. In his memoir, The Moon's a Balloon, he detailed using humor to cope with constant danger, including a surreal moment when he was pinned down by German snipers while wearing a ridiculous reconnaissance disguise. Despite his fame, Niven insisted on being treated like any other officer and earned respect through shared hardship rather than Hollywood credentials. Richard Burton emerged from a Welsh mining village to become one of Britain's greatest actors. But first he had to master the King's English in the Royal Air Force. Born Richard Walter Jenkins Jr., he grew up speaking Welsh and struggled with the technical English required for his navigator training after enlisting at 18 in 1944. Poor eyesight prevented Burton from becoming a pilot, which had been his initial ambition. However, he discovered his talent for performing during military theatrical productions. His powerful voice and commanding presence captivated audiences of fellow servicemen, sparking what would become one of the greatest classical acting careers of the 20th century. Though the war ended before he saw combat, military discipline helped channel Burton's rebellious nature into dramatic performances rather than self-destruction. Though his later struggles with alcohol suggested this lesson was imperfectly learned. After discharge, Burton won a scholarship to Oxford, where he studied under Professor Neville Coghill and refined his craft. James Doohan. James Doohan's most heroic performance wasn't on Star Trek, it was on D-Day. The Canadian actor landed on Juno Beach with the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division on June 6, 1944, leading his troops through anti-tank mines and personally taking out 2 German snipers who were pinning down Canadian forces. That night, tragedy struck when a nervous Canadian sentry mistakenly hit Duhan 6 times. 4 bullets hit his leg, 1 struck his chest, stopped by a silver cigarette case from his brother, and lost his right middle finger due to enemy fire. He refused medical evacuation and insisted on staying with his unit. Throughout his Star Trek career, camera operators carefully avoided showing Duhan's right hand, and special props hid his missing finger. When observant fans occasionally spotted his injury on screen, Duhan personally answered their letters, sharing his war story. That stubborn determination that characterized Scotty, it came from someone who demonstrated real courage under fire. Denholm Elliot. Denholm Elliot's gentle, nuanced performances came from someone who'd survived the unthinkable. In 1942, his RAF bomber got taken down over Denmark during a nighttime mission. Only Elliot and 2 other crewmen survived, and he spent the rest of the war in a German prisoner of war camp. In Stalag Luft 8B, Elliot found salvation through Shakespeare. The POWs received complete works from the Red Cross, and Elliot became obsessed with it, memorizing vast portions. With fellow prisoners, he formed the No-Name Players, performing makeshift productions that offered psychological escape from their grim circumstances. These prison performances became Elliot's drama school, where he discovered his ability to completely immerse himself in character. The trauma of captivity and constant uncertainty about survival gave him a profound understanding of human fragility that later informed his portrayals in films like Raiders of the Lost Ark and A Room with a View. Eddie Albert from Green Acres was a genuine war hero whose actions at Tarawa deserve far more recognition. As a Navy lieutenant in 1943, Albert piloted a small landing craft through coral reefs under constant Japanese fire during the bloody 3-day battle. When he spotted wounded Marines stranded in the water, he disobeyed orders and made between 26 to 30 separate rescue missions. Albert and his crew saved between 47 and 80 Marines. Accounts vary, but what's certain is many would have drowned without his intervention. His slow-moving boat made an easy target during each mission, but he kept going back. Though he received the Bronze Star, many historians believe his actions warranted the Medal of Honor. Albert rarely spoke about his battlefield heroism, preferring his public image as a comedian rather than being recognized for his extraordinary courage. But those rescued Marines never forgot the guy from Green Acres who risked everything to save them. You know what gets me about all these stories? These guys had everything: fame, money, gorgeous leading ladies throwing themselves at them. They could have easily gotten out of serving, found some excuse, pulled some strings, made a few movies to boost morale from the safety of a Hollywood soundstage. But they didn't. They walked away from million-dollar contracts, left their families, and faced the same dangers as every other young man their age. Some came back heroes. Others came back broken. A few almost didn't come back at all. And here's the thing that really strikes me. Most of them never talked about it. Jimmy Stewart carried those nightmares his whole life, but never said a word publicly. Lee Marvin lived in constant pain from his war wounds, but just got on with it. Christopher Lee took his secrets to the grave. They were part of what we call the greatest generation for a reason. When their country called, they answered. No excuses, no special treatment, no hiding behind their celebrity status. Just regular guys doing what they thought was right. I bet there are stories we missed, probably dozens of them. Hollywood was full of young actors back then, and a lot of them served. Some became huge stars later, others never made it big, but they all answered the call. So here's what I want to know. Which actor's story surprised you the most? I mean, I had no idea Paul Newman almost passed away on that carrier, or that Scotty from Star Trek was a D-Day hero. Drop a comment and let me know which story hit you the hardest. And hey, if you know about an actor we missed, tell us about them. I'm already thinking about doing a part 2, so your suggestions might just make it into the next video.